Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our live session today. My name is Larissa, and I'm an event planner at Microsoft Reactor, joining you from São Paulo in Brazil. Before we start, I have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. The session is being recorded and will be available to view on demand here on the Reactor YouTube channel within 48 hours. Keep an eye on the chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenter to answer at the end of the session. I will now turn it over to our speaker and our host for today. So please welcome Kamal here to start with you all. Hello, Kamal.
Hey, Larissa, thank you so much for hosting the show. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining for another episode of Copilot Chronicle. Really excited because today we have someone from Microsoft, Dwarakanath, who will be talking about how to accelerate development with GitHub Copilot. I think this is one of the most common basic thing as a developer you need to know in the world of AI. What are the strategies and with few live coding which he's going to show us today. So I think if you are someone into GitHub Copilot, I think as a developer you need to understand the workflow with GitHub Copilot and also understand the key features like inline suggestions, Copilot Chat, multi-modal switching. And always as a developer, I would suggest do not forget about the testing part, which is the test generation through live coding, which Dwarakanath is going to be doing. And also, he would cover a few strategies with prompt engineering tips, common pitfalls. So, definitely, this is a watch out session on GitHub Copilot. And without further ado, let me introduce you to the today's speaker, Dwarakanath Jyoti, who is a software engineering manager at Microsoft. And welcome to the show, Dwarakanath. And the forum is all yours. Excited to hear what is your experience using GitHub Copilot for the development.
Yeah, thank you, Kamal and Larissa. Yeah, hi, excited to be here. Hello, everyone. Good evening and good morning if you guys joining from other geography. Yeah, welcome to the session on accelerating development using GitHub Copilot. So, my name is Dwarakanath. I'm a software engineering manager at Microsoft with over 30 years of experience building large-scale systems, developer tooling, and cloud-native solutions. I'm a tech enthusiast who loves to code. So, in this session, I'll be sharing some learning that I had with GitHub Copilot, which I feel like very essential for a developer. And we'll be starting with some GitHub Copilot basics, and then quickly switch over to the actual features that the Copilot offers. With the most recent ones that I feel like it's really helpful. So we'll be starting from taking a legacy application to production with one of the use case that I built. So let's quickly look into the agenda for today. So yeah, this is the high-level topics that I'll be discussing. So one, very briefly on how Copilot works, and we'll be switching the gears for discussing on the three key factors that which I feel like taking that app from a legacy to a production with much more customization that we want to offer. So we'll be discussing on that, and along the way, we'll be also discussing how do you find the right tool within the GitHub Copilot for which of the use cases, and also at the end we'll be looking at the AI models. So which is the right scenario we'll be using for which AI model to use, and at the end we'll be looking at how do we craft a proper prompt to get most out of the Copilot. Yeah. So. Yeah, let's first see what and how Copilot works. So I think we now pretty much know how AI works. Right? So it's mostly about the context and also the instruction being passed. So if you look at the analogy goes is here, right? So assume it like a co-worker who's working alongside with you, who wants to know, who wants to work with you for a certain feature or probably an entire service as well. So how do you get started? So you'll be on a clean slate, right? So you definitely need to pass in some information for them to get started. So that's exactly what we call context, right? So, and then, we also give some instructions to start with, hey, can you get started on cloning the repo, and then, start writing some Python scripts and all these, right? Yeah, that is exactly what we need to communicate to the Copilot so that it goes in all sequences. And then the models is where they come up with some experience, right? So this whole analogy goes back to how you basically interact with a human being. That's exactly what we want to do with the Copilot as well. So the models typically mean like the experience. Now that we have the LLM models, where it is trained on certain languages and it has a lot of experience working with that. So now with the context from the models, you can get most out of Copilot. So that's exactly what we used to work in the further demo task. So one pro tip that you can identify is how are we going to prompt? That exactly makes a difference with how you basically make most out of Copilot. So, and in addition, there are some good factors that we need to consider, like, in the Copilot chat, for example, you can make use of the complete scoping, right? So when I say scope, that's how you define the chat participants or variables or slash commands. So one example is using the chart participants, like, at workspace, it basically takes up the entire core base and then tries to find the proper references for you based on the given prompt and make some code changes. So this is exactly what happens. Similar with the slash command that we say like now, slash fix or explain, it basically does the better job for you. So these are some really good tools that we have with Copilot where you can use it daily to make most use of it. Yeah. So yeah, the first use case that we can deep dive more. So is on how do we transition apps from legacy to modern standards. So this is where we typically end up doing every day. So this will involve like doing a lot of code changes in the repo where if you're a senior, you probably would know what changes to make, and you go step by step saying that no, this is something that I have for a scope which I'd be building, right? So what if there is a new a junior developer joining a team and wants to know more about the code base, right? So these are certain caveats that we have when working with a legacy or probably a already built code base. So let's quickly look at few of the tools that a corporate offers, and that will help us to actually move forward to the development. So the first one that we can look at is the corporate completions. As you know, it's the auto completion feature where as you when you start typing, it basically gives a suggestion. And if you like it, you accept, or probably you can even reprompt and ask it to further refine. Right. So this is a very helpful feature that you have as part of your the authoring page itself, right? So, and the other one that we'll be looking at is the corporate chat, which we predominantly use every day. So, in case we are using VS Code or the other tools, other code editors. So, this is something like it comes handy as and when you do. So, you basically have, you can ask it to explain the code or build something like architecture diagram, or ask it to do some smaller tasks like, hey, can you extend the particular method to also handle certain edge cases. So this is something that we'll be doing every day, right? So at the end, we'll also be looking at the agent. So agent mode is something like, it does the job for us, right? So it basically handles a lot of file changes. It takes your requirements and does a lot of things behind. And we're also looking at the coding agents in brief. I'm not going to go too much deeper because this session is mostly towards giving a complete high-level overview on the Copilot. So this session, I'll be just focusing on what is coding agent, and also we'll be working with one of the examples to see right now how it basically does to understand the end-to-end of coding agents operations. And the last one for this particular theme is content exclusion, but this is only for the enterprise users, not for the public one. So I have a pro account, but this doesn't work there. So this is just to give them glimpse like this is something with already available Copilot where this will be coming handy just in case like if GitHub offers this as a public offering, and I think like this is something which comes handy. So we discuss more on the each of these in a live demo. So let me quickly switch the views. So this is a repository that I follow, like with the actual Copilot demo. So this link will be shared to you. So I just open the whole repo, the code spaces, so that it comes handy with the browser. You can prefer like any of the code editors you have. So mostly with the VS Code I operate. So it's up to you, how you do that. And let me go here. So this is the application that I built. So this is a very simple application that you can say, like, we have a Python uh, FastAPI as the backend, which basically has endpoints like activities and enroll. So this application is mostly for the ABC Sports Center, where it offers a couple of endpoints, and it gives you in details, what are the activities available as part of the Sports Center, and if someone is listening, they can enroll to that particular activity. Right? So this is exactly the API. And the same thing for the frontend. So it's built in React. So with the React, we have this component type. The activity card and also the enrollment page. So I just show you this one more quickly. It's spinning up the application here so that we have it more live than doing it in
Hi,
other
Dwara.
way around. Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but there is a little bit of something interfering with your microphone, and we can't hear you very well.
Oh, let me check. Is it better now? I guess it's the same.
Yes, I can hear you better.
Better, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for confirming. All right. The backend API is up. We'll quickly verify if this is up. So let me make it a public because I'm working in code spaces. This is one case where the API endpoint to be accessible within the front end. So this is actually very much needed. Let me see if this is up. Uh, yeah, slash activities. Yeah, this is up. So the API is returning the get response, and with quickly it's the front end app. Yeah, as I said, the front end is in React, and the back end is in the Fast API, so Python. And this is a very very simple app where we can start looking at what are the caveats, and probably let's try to make it more modernized. So the first one, yeah, so this is the app. You have the activity cards here alongside, just listing on what are the feature activities. And if you want to enroll, you can just put in your email ID and then, what are the activities. So here, for simple case, I just added like, select button alone and hit enroll. When I hit enroll, it doesn't have anything. Right? It just says like enroll, but the page doesn't refresh or it doesn't have anything to show up the active participants. Right? So now, since this is one of the valid issue that we usually face in day-to-day development. So now let's try to go more deeper and try to make some changes to the code. So here, as we know, we are actually having an enroll endpoint. So if you see here, right, the one potential issue for this application is if I want to do the same again, so the same activity, there is Zoomer, right? So it does allow. So meaning there is no restriction on how many entries that I can make for the same email ID and for the activity. So this is actually wrong. What I can do is this is where if you want to make some specific changes, you can technically use the code completions where you specifically ask verify check uh, uh, the email is already moved, right? Yeah, yeah. So I think this is a valid case, right? So we'll see the actual one, it basically suggests. So these are the host texts that we see from Copilot, where as and when it basically understands your actual comment and as well as like the surrounding code. So it basically understood the entire code file and it also suggesting the other one. So right now I haven't mentioned like what is the enrollment. So it did pick by understanding the whole part here. Yeah, so either if I want, I can accept it or I can do another session as well. So here's where you basically see what are other rest of the sessions it has and you can technically accept. So I'm just going with the flow. This one. So in addition, what we could technically do is we can also have a inline chat. So this is an editor inline chat. You can ask like validate if the email ID is valid. Oh, okay, I should have meant what means by valid, right? So this is a black prompt as well. So we should technically say like, what is exactly what we want to verify. So that will help us to speed up the coding. Yeah, it did add the one of the package, the regex, and as well as like it did suggest to verify the email address. So this is exactly what the inline chat is about, and the code completions that we saw. So I'm just removing it for now so that we can use the same for the other editor modes. Okay. All right, so this is about uh, yeah. So now let's open the Copilot Chat. All right. So the Copilot Chat basically offers in all the available code editors. So predominantly, we are using VS Code. So it basically installed by an extension. So I think you can install the Copilot Chat extension, and this will be available. And so Copilot Chat mostly for it basically handles or knows about your entire code base by giving you by like it's just that you have to specify what is the scope and those instructions. So I'll sort of walk you through on what exactly each of the options here. So there are three different modes that we have. One is the Ask mode. So the Ask mode is pretty much on how you basically do with the Q&A with your colleagues, right? So if you're joining newly, you pretty much ask me, hey, what is this code base about? So now you're uh, now your colleague would basically explain about each of the methods involved, and how it is basically linked and all those, right? So now let's quickly see like creating a high level app. So here I'm gonna ask you to explain. So here is where we see the chat participant, like the workspace. The workspace takes the entire repository as a source, and /explain is uh, the condition that I specified. So here it basically explains the code. So let me ask you to explain uh, the backend app in points. Yeah, so you see the references, right? It did pick the main.py. So I didn't specify which file it has to refer, but it did pick it. So the workspace basically, the Copilot is smart enough to understand what we are basically referring to. And I didn't even specify like which file it is. So it did pick the right code and started to explain. So here with the enroll method, we could see, it basically said there's an enroll, and it has like, it also suggested certain gotcha. So this is how it will be helpful. So now let me go one level deeper and ask you to generate uh, sequence diagram uh, of the app. Let's see what it written. So it basically took all the files it wanted and tried to have the sequence diagram created. I think within few seconds it did create the sequence diagram. So now let's go to the README file, and here we can add diagram. It's a minimite, so it's in a minimite format. So I'm just pasting here. So now let's look at this one, right? So this all represented profit. So now that we have a handy sequence diagram already created. So I didn't even specify the flow anywhere, not even in the README. So it was able to understand with the code that we have written, with the references of the API endpoints in the front end, the JSX file, and it was able to create the sequence here. So the user basically has through the email and the activity and hits the enroll. Now from the front end app, it goes to the back end, and the data enrollment happens, and then the validation of email or whatever that we added. So and then it returned back. So this is exactly what we did, right? So now this is how the ask mode works. So typically, whatever we have as a Q&A, whatever something you want to know about, so this exactly comes handy. And in here, you can also change the models. So now that I use a 4.1, but you're free to, mostly any of the models and try to explore the responses. Certain responses are more deep. So in case if it depends on the questions that you ask. If that requires a deep reasoning, I think you are okay to move to any other the models and try out the responses. I think this out of the session. So let me quickly go to the other mode that we have, the edit mode. So you can consider edit mode as something you pretty much know what to do the changes, right? So now in everyday developer life, so we basically have this story, user story. In that user story, it is more chunked, and you pretty much know what are the code changes that you want to do. So now it becomes easier, right? So now as a developer, you have this conceptual idea where, hey, this is the file that I want to modify and what is the method, and you pretty much go to the file, change that particular, right? So this is exactly what the edit mode is. So now I have to specify what is the exact file that I have to modify. So one such thing probably we can add is the JSX file. So this time we'll add the JSX. So we'll see. Oh, sorry, and the JS file. So now that this is how um, the context is set, right? So whenever whatever is the active file, it basically picks it. The Copilot Chat basically picks. But if you want to refer to something else, I think you are free to drag and drop, or you can add a context using this button where you specify what you want to have. So this doesn't restrict only the files, but I can also say like the folders and everything. So now I'm saying, can you here the activity card to include if participants. Yeah, so probably let's see. So it did recognize the file, the app.jsx as the path, and it is modifying the code that we exactly wanted to. So it can be more deeper on what exactly we wanted, and you pretty much know where to modify the code. So this is best in that case where you don't want Copilot to over-engineer and do certain things. So that's what in the agent mode we typically talk about. But in the edit mode, you typically know like, hey, as a developer, this is exactly the change that I want to do in a minimal. So the edit mode comes very handy, and you can basically do that. And the next one that we'll be discussing is on the agent mode. So before we do that, so probably I can just show you a glimpse on uh, this one, right? So these are the different chat modes that we have. So ask mode, as we discussed, it's more of a chat like Q&A with the Copilot. The edit mode is mostly on the modifying the existing code, and you pretty much know what to. So that's the edit mode. And the agent mode is where there are multiple steps involved. One such example that we can view, right, where you want to completely revamp an complete component, and you want agent to basically take the lead and also to suggest certain things. So, but even there, I think like when you have the proper prompt defined, where you say,
Dwarak, you're on mute. We can't hear you. No.
Yeah, you can try reconnecting Dwarakanath.
Yeah, is it better now? I
Yes.
switched my mic. Sorry.
Yeah.
So maybe some issues with the audio device. All right. As I was talking, so on the agent mode, we'd be giving the Copilot a much bigger task, right? So which is more on having a multiple steps to do, and also telling it, once the changes are done, you go and test it, and then debug if there are any issues. You specify like, hey, there is some issues in the terminal that you have to fix, or you also want to run some commands. Right now with the edit mode, we don't get that flexibility where it doesn't run the command, right? So, but in agent mode, it's mostly like autonomous, where you say like, hey, you decide on what is exactly wanted to accomplish a task. So, for an example here, add packet blocks to the API, add write the test for the whole file that we have, and so for our example, we can also say like, like building a a complete page, like in a report where you basically have all the participants for each activity. So this can be built using agent mode. So let's quickly look into one. So here, so I'd ask slash code base. So here it basically refers to the whole code base here, and create a new page for what is sequence report with proper styling. Yeah, let's see how it basically took. So the context is the code base here, and then it did search for all the file that it wanted, and then it's working on a plan. Yeah, so it's search for the text participant report. So it basically gives us the whole at least a draft on what exactly it is going to modify, and then it does the job. For some reasons it didn't run it. Probably, yeah, it did modify. So here it is. So participant reports.jsx. So we'll also see what are the other changes it did. So here in the app.js, so it did add for certain activities and the participants. Yeah, this is the newer page that we created. So let's quickly look at the UI to see if this is something. I think I have to restart the app. Yeah, the application startup is complete. We look at for some reasons it is failing. I don't know if it's due to the backend chain. Check. Yeah. So this is just to show an example of what it basically does. So you can also debug and probably assign the same thing to the agent again. So what is exactly is failing, and it will help you to resolve the issue. So for us, I think this one failed. We're trying to go to the port 3000. So we'll just quickly look at try to see, or we can look here. But it is for some reason. Yeah. Or we can also prompt it to say debug the application to see if it renders the app. Yeah. This is something the agent would start doing. So it will ask it want to run the command. So npm start. So when you say that, so it basically runs the whole command for us, like we do here. So I'm not going to run it in the interest of time, but this is how you can typically debug. Since I'm running in port spaces, there could be a possibility that the port didn't work out. But we can we can look at that later in case of time permits. But you can do something like debug the app, so it runs the command and helps you to debug, and then finally you can do a more reprompting to make it in a better way. So the other one is on the coding agent. So coding agent is mostly about now that we saw the agent, right, the Copilot Chat agent, but coding agent is most on it's more like automated agent, which basically takes a complete ownership of building something even bigger. Say one such example is if you want to build a complete React front end, giving it a task like how you want to build and what are the instructions, and what are the styling that you want to do. And these are something like the coding agent typically takes and start to work. So now, so the workflow goes this way. So either you can assign a task in GitHub issues, or you can actually do it in the PR as well. So you can assign the PR to basically the co-parent and ask it to do the work for you. So this one, and once the task is assigned, so it basically forms a prompt. So with that prompt, it basically takes the task command that you gave and also with the context that you have passed, and it generates a response with the code and other documentations. And this is the how you basically do the iteration, right? So here, what is actually helpful is on the complete task automation. So it depends on how we completely orchestrate the task. It could be like so small, or probably you can give it in a task where we pretty much know what we needed, and you chunk it out in the way that you wanted. Like, first this is the component that you have to build, and then you basically have to build a CSS, and then debug it. So with this way, it basically does all the things in an isolated environment. It also ensures that the application is tested. So and it follows the whole PR cycle. Like, it creates a branch, it does the changes, it commits it, and the feedback loop goes through. And in addition, these are done in parallel, right? So now the agent, we are the ones that are actually waiting in the code editor to wait for it to complete and look for the changes. But here, the coding agent, as I said, it's completely automated. It runs in an isolated environment. So we are not bothered by its operation. It runs completely out of our view. So it's mostly like, assigning your coworker a task, and probably you sign up for the day. And the next day you turn up and the task is done, right? So it's very similar. And now that we're also doing the logs, you can also use it's very transparent on what it basically does. You can find the references as we saw in the agent, and also the tools that it used. So let's quickly check the coding agents here. So in the GitHub, okay, if you go, so here is where you have the Copilot. So in the Copilot, you basically find the agents and spaces. Let's talk about spaces later, but let's quickly check the agents part. So in the agent mode, right? So you can add something like, for which repo that you want to run this against. So now that we are on the demo, so let me quickly check that one. We have the Reactor Copilot demo, and which branch you want to run in. And so in the Copilot mode, agent mode, I'm going to ask it to create or basically create a database. So since like our app doesn't have a database yet, so I would say like creating a SQLite database, which is very lightweight, and asking it to use it for the API, where whenever new enrollment is added, so that has to go into the database, right? Yeah, create a SQLite database and use it for backend data store. Make sure the activity can be added to the database. Fetch. Okay. Yeah. So probably this is something that you can add, and so we could see like it basically creates a issue. Let's see. Yeah, it created an issue for us on the same repository, and it did assign the reviews to Copilot and who the reviews are and the assignees are. So here the Copilot is also one of the assignees. So it's going to start doing our work. So it just started. In the meantime, we can go the other topics that we have, and then once again check on what is exactly happening. So this is something that you could see, like it did create a workflow. Whenever an issue creates a workflow where there is some other runner through which it basically clones the repo, does all the operations for us, understands the code, and you could see all the operations on what the Copilot agent does when you assign this one. So here you could see like, it picked it up, and it also said the verbose statement, what is it going to try, and it read the README file, and it's going through each of the folders to understand the code and finally make the change. We'll give it some time. So we'll look at end of the session to see if this is complete. let me go into the other one. Yeah. This is the second theme that I have for today, where we are going to look at how are we going to make the application more production ready. Okay. So when we say production ready, so we are not just going to ship the code as and when we do. So now that we actually made some changes, we are not going to push it, right? So there are some standards we typically follow, where that should align with the team's coding standards, and also with certain patterns in which we have to follow. So these are something we'll be ensuring whenever we move to production. So or get the code to be merged, right? So this is exactly what this theme is about. Where what are the tools that you can use for in Copilot to make it handy. So some of the tools that we have, which is basically helping to customize GitHub Copilot, is the custom instructions and the reusable prompts and chat modes. So with the custom instructions, it's mostly straightforward to say like, hey, if I don't specify the instruction, it basically does in the way the LLMs are basically have trained on, right? So now that we tried with ask mode, edit, agent, also in the coding agent part, we never specified our custom instructions, like how you should basically code, what is the coding standards, if I want to make some naming conventions. So these are something we didn't specify. But here is where the custom instructions, you specify what is exactly needed for you and or your team, and you can make the changes. So let me show you in a while. But so here on the reusable prompts as well. On the reusable prompts, this is where you get your more profitable thing, right? So in case if you're working on an app or a bigger service where you are actually doing some reprompting with the same thing again, and you feel like, hey, this is something my coworker would also be using. So we basically share it in the chat where he can also use. So that's not a viable option, right? So this is where the reusable prompts are going to be really handy, where you basically check into the code as a prompt file in the markdown format, and whenever the other coworker wants, basically can refer to the prompt file and show that. So next thing is the custom chat modes. With the custom chat modes, this is more towards the other modes that we had, like ask, edit, and agent. Here, Copilot basically offers you another dimension to it, where you say, how you want the Copilot to basically respond, assuming which role, right? Say I can say like, hey, I'm an architect who specializes in the API, and probably if we ask some questions, it will basically return the response in such a way that it has assumed that particular role, right? So this is exactly what the custom chat modes are. And we'll also look at the Copilot extensions. So we have a brief session on that, where the Copilot extensions are something you are actually enhancing the Copilot's response by giving it more context, like the internal or external tools access, or the documentation and stuff, so that in the editor, you basically ask the extension to basically do some operations for you. So we'll look at the live demo for these ones. At the end, we'll also look at the code review and how you do basically assign a code review for the Copilot, and as well as how you can do the code review in the editor pages. So yeah, as I said, on the customization, so these are the three things we have, like on major scale, how a Copilot basically have this as an offering. So first one is the custom instructions, which we'll be adding it to a file called copilot.instruction.markdown. And if there is anything specific, we'll be adding it to a folder called GitHub/instructions. Next thing is the reusable prompts. We'll be adding it to a folder called GitHub/prompts folder. So it basically picks. I'll show you how to run these ones. I'll quickly switch my data to here. I'm going to close this page. So I have a separate branch created for that particular one to showcase these examples. So in here, if you open that .github, so the .github is one which GitHub basically uses for all the instructions that we want to pass. So here, first one that would be looking at the Copilot icon instructions, right? So we'll see one of the example of on a general coding standards, how a naming convention of a particular variable should be. If it's a camel case, the constant should be all caps and everything, right? So this is exactly useful if you want to maintain a proper standard across the code base, this is something would come handy as and when you start developing a particular service or a component where multiple people are involved, not just you. So here we'll quickly look at one of the example of how it is using, but we'll also see on the other instructions that we have, like Python.instructions. So this is the very specific instruction that we created under the instructions folder. So here we say, like, on the Python, so how your coding styles should be, so which pattern should follow, and we can also specify how the documentation for these and everything. So if you look at, right, in the backend code, we didn't have not even one line of comment or a documentation. So we'll try to see how these instructions are going to be helpful. So now the Copilot instructions are something, it is automatically picked. Now that the Python instruction is something that you can add by specifying which context. So here I'm going to add, like, specify the python.instruction.md, and I'm going to switch. I don't even have to specify the file. So we'll see, like, which file it picks, right? In the Python instruction, you can also see where this instruction should apply to, right? So this is a very important factor, where we say, like, the apply to field would typically say this would apply only to the .py format. The same thing for the React.js as well. So we say, like, the JSX, CSS format. So this makes it very much customized, where as and when you start developing for certain features, you want to even further chunk the instructions out and how we want to maintain. This is something it's really handy for us. So let's quickly do something on the agent mode, where we ask, so now that in the edit, now that in this particular one, we didn't have a endpoint for disenrolling, right? So we'll ask the code base to basically add a new endpoint in the backend for disenrolling a participant from the We'll see, like, now how this works. So now that it took the entire code base as the context, and also took the Python instructions. So here, let's search for this. Yeah, the references, right? I never specify the Copilot instructions. So this is something by default, this be picked. These are the general coding guidelines you want to have. This should be in Copilot instructions. So whatever is specific to a task, or specific to a language, or specific to a task, that you can add under /instructions folder. And you can also specify on the VS Code level, there is something like on the settings you can add. So these are all taken into play. So we'll see at the end if it did generate, right? So I didn't specify even to modify the enroll activity method to have a proper documentation. So this is how it comes handy. So whenever you do a refactoring of the code, and it's really hard for a developer to go and do for all the files that you have, right? So in case if these instructions are properly set, and when you're actually working on a specific piece, it does ensure that the whole code is read, understood, and it does modify what is required. So even for this, like, it added a documentation for this particular method. The same thing that I requested for, like, disenroll request, and this one, yeah, I did that. So yeah, this is about the custom instructions. We'll look at the prompts, right? So the prompts are something, as I told, where if you want to basically have something like a reusable prompt, where we are using multiple times, and we want to ensure that those prompts are not once again returned. So this way we basically have this as a one copy of it, and then we can call that in the chat mode and ask it to run it. So here, once a thing is probably, I can take this one, like, create readme prompt or markdown, right? So here the ask is to basically create a readme file with the proper information that it basically understands the whole context of the code base and gives me on a level like use the emojis, use something like license, contributing, and it should also give me a well-structured and comprehensive data. So it's just a very sample one that I did. Maybe I can ask it to run here. So for this one, you did basically do the similar to the slash commands, right? So you can use a slash command slash and create readme. So name of the file is create readme.prompt. So it's going to ignore the prompt.md. So whatever you specify as the name, it basically picks here. Yeah. So I don't have to do or typing anything. So this exactly would follow, like follow instructions create readme.md. So if you see the references, right, it did with the Copilot instructions are marked down, and it is going to run the prompt file here. So we'll see if it's basically creating a readme file with the changes. Yeah. So as I said, in a day-to-day life, I think these are something that we typically used to do, right? So whenever we develop a code, we check in, but unfortunately, we don't make sure the documentations are proper. This is where our most of time goes, right? There's a tech debt that is already there where, hey, there are some troubleshooting guys we need to add. There are some contributing guide we need to. So these are something which often gets piled up. So, but if there are some prompts that you have and you want the developers to make sure before they check in, you want to run this one. So this is where it comes very handy, where you have the reusable prompts. Okay. That's on this one. So let's quickly switch gears since like it's already time. On the Copilot code review, right? So in the Copilot code review, this one is basically as a human where we go and verify the code on all the aspects, right? Not just on the logic, but also making sure it has a proper syntax and the code flow is proper and the naming convention and other standards are proper, right? So can we abstract this out to someone like an AI who can basically do something on our behalf? So this is where the Copilot code review comes really handy. So we'll see for the changes it basically did and try to see if that is making a lot of sense. So it did modify. So the prompt really worked and it said like, it's successfully updated. So now that we have this one, let's see if it's in the proper state. Yeah. So now it's pretty much a good one, right? So now that we added a new endpoint called disenroll, even this is included. I think this is good. This is a very simple one where we can check in. Yeah. So now we have the changes here. And as a code review, now that there are two things that one, either in the same file that you can ask for a review. That's something that I'm going to do now, where I'm going to accept everything here. Okay. I'm going to go to this file and then ask it to do a review. So now that it did that, so what I can do is I can ask the Copilot to review this piece of code alone. So let's do that. This is one of the mode which the Copilot offers, where you review the changes alone for the one which is highlighted. So the other one is the review changes, which I'll be talking about. So yeah, it did review for the piece of code that we set, and it gave a very good suggestion on how do you improve. And either if you like, you can apply and go next, or you can discard. For now, I'm just going to apply, and it is going to make the changes. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm skipping this part. Okay, there is something called review changes, right? So now that we are making a bunch of code file changes, and it's all bulk, right? So now you also want to ensure, these are all properly reviewed before it is being committed to a remote branch, right? So now that we are going to create a PR, but before creating a PR, I want to ensure that. So in the VS Code itself, there's an option where you have this particular line, right? So this says like Copilot code review uncommitted changes. So before I commit anything, so this is something you can verify. So I'm gonna hit this button. So it's gonna review all the changes that has been made in the particular branch in local, and it is gonna give some feedback. Yeah, this is how we do. And what is the other mode that we could do is, of course, we saw on the PR level, right? So in the PR, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm juggling. Let me, yeah, this one, right? So there are in pull requests as well. If you're in the pro account, the pro or the other the subscribe one, so you can typically assign a particular pull request in the reviewer section. You assign the Copilot. It takes the first pass. It gives a very good feedback for you to go and look at. Hey, I think this one is done. I guess so. Just following back to the other loop that we had for the coding agent, where we asked it to create a SQLite database and to use it a backend store, right? So I think like it did do that, specifying the database models, changes, the data migration. We'll look at the code, but at least like it did a pretty good job on even doing a debugging or a testing to come up with it. So this is pretty nice. So we'll review it. Yeah. So there's the code. In the main.py, it basically added a SQLite database config, and the rest of the changes are done. Right. Yeah. So this is how we basically can make use of coding agent. Now that we've been talking more than 10 minutes, it did the job for us and the code is ready. So it's just not it, right? We can even ask Copilot to do a few more things. So now that it is there, you review, and then probably you see like there is something that you want to change. So even the same menu, you can go and ask it to re-prompt, like start chat, and you can do the changes. Okay, so this is just a glimpse of it on the code review part. So we'll go back to the Twitter. Yeah. So here, as we did for the uncommitted changes review, it did give us certain comments that you can go and fix, right? So this really helpful before we even commit the code. This comes really handy. Yeah, this is one of it. And the other one that we didn't discuss is about on the modes, the customization is actually on the chat modes, right? This is pretty much helpful when you are working on a certain application where you want some guidance on how do we make it, follow a proper process or probably proper standards. Since like the LLM basically can give a very structured response, but if you want something to assume a role and take it forward, so this is where it's come very handy. So now let's see for one of them, right? Probably we can say like the React expert chat model. In the change now, we basically did for disenrolling the participants in the API, right? So we can ask this particular chat mode to generate the React code changes. So this is exactly what it can do. So you specify like how you want to modify the code, and what are the patterns it should follow, and all those stuff. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go and specify the chat mode here. In the chat mode, as we're talking, like there are other modes, right? Agent, task. So here you say like you configure it first. Not to use it, you should configure it. By default, it basically detects all the modes from this /chat modes folder. Here you can pick the React expert. Now, for some reason, I think they can. Let me check that one. But maybe you can also put it here or start. But let me check it. So here we basically get the chat modes, very similar to what we get it here. So this is one of the example. This in my local VS code. Let me switch to the customization demo branch. So since like I already have the chat modes here it is already configured. So in the custom, you basically get the API architect, and you can ask it to explain like explain the party sequence API, in detail and identify if it doesn't follow standards, right? So just a vague prompt, but let's see like if the API architect one works or not. So now that I asked like in the API architect chat mode, so these are something that we define. What should that particular architect do? So it did ask me a follow-up question, right? So this is exactly the one which as you interact with certain role, like if an architect near in-house there in the company, you basically ask certain questions. So he's going to reprompt with you with certain things, right? Hey, provide me the API endpoint URL or coding language, which language are you using, and if there are any documentation. So these are something which it prompt. So it is more structured on the way that you want to handle. So the response from the Copilot is going to be pretty much meaningful towards what is actually needed than like a completely autonomous response that you get from Copilot where it does the code change for us. So, but instead, this is going to be really helpful in the long run. Okay, so in the interest of time, yeah, we did discuss the code review, and the previous one, yeah, we did discuss on the customizations, and the extensions is where I had a lot of things to share. Probably I can show that here. So here, there's a separate repo that I created that is for the extensions. I think that will be shared to you after this meeting. So here, the extensions are typically are the ones which enhances the Copilot behavior by providing some tools, documentation support, and everything, right? So this is going to help as and when we develop, where as a developer, you can specify what extension to use. For an example, in the marketplace, you can find something on the Stack Overflow, where with that, you can also specify your debugger chat, like in the terminal chat, saying like there's some issue, and you can ask the extension to go and verify if there are any relevant issues that happened recently. So this is how the extension works today. So now the workflow goes this way, like when a user uses an extension, the extension is used by a chat participant, like how you do for at terminal or at workspace, very similar to that. You call at the rate and my extension, and you can specify like and that is done with the proper prompt. So the Copilot chat basically takes it, it contacts a GitHub app that we create, and that app, it basically calls the extension service, and the extension service is going to reply back to the Copilot service again, and then to the Copilot chat it be rendered, and the user gets notified. So this is the workflow for the Copilot extension. So I did build it from scratch. So this is one of them for the same example that we used for ABC Sports Center, right? So I want to extend this for another part where there is a training school which we want to partner with. They have some very good very good campus where they have a very good trainers and good tournaments happening. And if you want to integrate with them, so what is something that you want to do, right? So here, this whole thing I built it with a Node.js, but you can do with any of the API. But this is a very simple app. As we saw, there are three things that's very essential for building a Copilot extension. One, a GitHub app, which we'll be talking in a bit. The other is the extension service and the extension data, right? So this is an extension service that we have created. Extension service you can create, you can assume it like an API where it has certain endpoints. Majorly the one that the GitHub app wants to communicate. So the one that it wants to communicate is of course on the info, right? Just want to check like the basic details of a service where it is available or not. So on the callback is where whenever the app is called, it basically says like, yeah, it is available. And the next one is the actual /Copilot, where that is where when you basically chat in the Copilot, the prompt basically goes to this endpoint /Copilot endpoint. Let me see. Yeah, so this one, right? So it takes your payload and it's going to do some operations based on the data that you have. So this is a very simplistic demo that I created for the extensions, where it's going to parse certain markdown files based on the data that you provide. Like it's going to add a job description, school overview, staffs, tournament details, coaches details, and everything, and it's going to respond back to the Copilot, right? So these are some data that we have. Like agent content is the folder where I have put up certain details about the extension data that I talked about. So the extension data, what those particular extension servers should rely on. So it says like, for the coaches, who are them and what are their credentials. The same thing for the tournaments as well. This one. Okay. Now let's see how to configure a GitHub app for it to use, right? Since I already created, I'm going to show you how I basically did. So that in the interest of time, we can move to the other. So here, scroll down. So go to your settings page, scroll down to the developer settings. In the developer settings, you want to create a new GitHub app. So you can use GitHub Mobile. Oh, I'm sorry. I think that's going to take time. But this is the ABC training school with the same exact code that I basically created. I'm really sorry. This prompting. But the crux here is with the app, your Copilot is going to chat with you, and the workflow goes like, from the chat, it goes to GitHub app, from the GitHub app to the extension service. So let me show this one. Yeah, it's done. Good. So with the ABC Training School app, I basically added certain necessary information, like specifying the homepage URL that we had like a /info for that one. It can be any extension service, need not be like the one that I showed, but any API that you created, you can have this info. And the same thing for the callback as well. And the other thing that is needed is the actual the Copilot part, right? In the Copilot, you need to specify what is the app type. There are two types of extension that you can create. One is the skill set, and another is the agent. Skill set, you can assume like it's a very lightweight thing that you want to do, like reading a documentation or doing a very trivial work. But agent is something, as like the agentic task where you want to say like you have to run some tools to perform it. So this is where this is going to be really helpful. Like you create an Copilot, you create an app with the app type as agent, and here you specify the URL as /Copilot. So this one is going to use for all the chat related conversations, right? So let me ensure the extensions demo. This is the extension service that we have. Let me run this one so that it's up, and we can verify if this is up in the usual one. And we'll also check in the VS Code how the response is coming back. Right? So I know that we're on time, but let me take a few more minutes to walk you through the rest of the pieces that we have. Good. So I guess like our extension service is up. So this is what it offers, like the coaching tournaments and our sponsors and stuff, right? So one thing is in the VS Code, this is something would work, but in the code spaces, it might not work. So here, what I could do is this, since like I'm in the local VS Code, I'm gonna switch to the API, ask mode again. So here, I'm gonna call the ABC Training School and provide a list of sponsors for the athletes, right? It's gonna go and check our extension service. So right now what happens is the chat goes to the app that we created. From the app, it goes to the extension service, and it's gonna pull that sponsor. I think it has not been disclosed. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, let me try the other one. Provide the tournament details, something like that. I mean, and this is a very simple level, but you can also use this data to build the application as well. Let's say if there are some standards that you want to mention, and your organization wants to build something where it was built as an extension. Using that, you want to build a separate app. So this is something like would help you along the way, where you're not moving out of your actual code area. Instead, like you're using the extension to profitable there. Yeah. So these are the tournament details, right? That we added in one of the data here. Yeah. The upcoming tournaments and stuff. So it did return the response through our app to the Copilot Chat here, as we discussed here. Like this is the exact flow that happened. So now we are able to see the response of it. Okay, so let's quickly go to the third key theme that we had for the trade. So one of the MCP integration, right? So as we know the MCP, so the Model Context Protocol. So it basically has, it's like a USB C type port where it can fit for, any of the LLM models where you basically mention what is the exact tool that you want to run, right? So you can consider like a USB C type cable where you can plug in and basically use it for any other integration. So we'll be looking at a GitHub MCP and as well as like Microsoft Learn to how to create a complete documentation that requires for us to move to or deploy an app. So that we'll be looking at. The other thing that we'll be looking at is the Copilot spaces. So this is on like a knowledge base that is built internally, like a subject matter expert, you can assume, where you upload a document and basically answer something on top of it, right? So and there is something called knowledge base as well, but this is only available in enterprise customers alone. Since like we are in a pro subscription, like we can't show it, but I can just walk you through what is the difference of it. So as we discussed, like Model Context Protocol, yeah, there's a USB C type for AI, where you specify what is the AI tool that you wanted, and the Copilot basically determines which MCP server to call, right? So we look at a couple of them, but this is something how you can configure, right? So you can use the mcp.json in the VS Code, in the VS Code folder, or you can also configure the settings JSON, that is for the complete the user profile. But if it's only for if it's needed for the repo, you need to configure it in the mcp.json. Let me show that here. So in this, sorry, let me switch back to the same repo again. And here there's a MCP integration demo. In the MCP integration demo, there's .vs Code. In there, I have configured the MCP servers, right? There are two servers that I configured, one for the GitHub and for the Microsoft Learn as well. So you can find a list of MCP servers which we currently have open source, and also there's a good GitHub link which basically lists down what are the MCP servers that we can use. So I just handpicked these ones for our entire case here. So let me show you that one. So here there is a option for us to see if the MCP servers are installed or not, right? So these are the MCP servers that is installed, but it's not running. So since I didn't run, so you can start the MCP server manually here, or there's another way around as well. But in order to use the MCP server in the chat, you need to check in the tools if those are checked in. Yeah, in the MCP server checked in, and what are the other options that it can do. For an example, with GitHub, you can create an issue, pull request, branch, and stuff. The same thing goes for the Learn as well. So we'll make use of this, right? So what I will do is I'll combine multiple things here, where we are going to combine an MCP server with GitHub, Microsoft Learn, and also make use of coding agent for us to do a complete end-to-end deployment, right? Or give me a complete walkthrough on how to do. So this is something that I had as a handy prompt. The interest of time I'm just pasting here. So I'm just asking you to create an issue with the details around how to deploy this app to Azure App Service. This is a very common use case that we have every day, right? So you want to push something and deploy to a remote server where we can run it. And then by referring the latest info from Microsoft Learn Docs. So since I just mentioned Microsoft Learn Docs, it's going to pick the MCP, the Microsoft Learn MCP, and start to create a documentation and provide a reference to the Learn page as well. And the acceptance criteria is to come up with the implementation plan, and and finally I say like assign the issue to Copilot. So in the earlier that we saw, we basically went to Copilot page in GitHub website, and in there, in the coding agent part, so we basically mentioned the whole prompt, right? It created an issue and stuff. But via the VS Code as well, you can do the same, where you specify this prompt, and at the end you say like, assign the issue to Copilot. So let's see like what happens. So first thing, like we want to see if it did pick the right MCP server or not, right? So that is something that we want to check. It is asking for running. Yeah, see, it did call the learn doc MCP server with this question, like how do you deploy a React and Python app to Azure App Service? I never specified much clear detail, but it did able to create it. And the same thing for GitHub MCP as well. It is going to create an issue, right? If you see, it's going to create an issue by passing in these payload. Yeah, good. So I think like now it is done. So I think, oh, it's failed to the PAT token, but that's fine. So I don't think we have to debug this now. But this is just a glimpse to show you how you can work with MCP integration, where you can specify all the MCP servers here and you can play around. So very similar to this one, where you can basically debug, brainstorm, and finally assign the issue to Copilot, so that it makes it so much end-to-end. Okay. So the next one I'm going to talk about is on the Copilot spaces and knowledge bases. So the knowledge base, of course, it's one of the enterprise.
Dwarakanath, just a quick check, because we are running out of time. So just wanted to know how long we need to wrap up this.
I think, yeah, I'm just done. So next one is just a general guidelines. I'll be wrapping up in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So on the Copilot spaces, right? So here's where we basically add any documentation or a code files to properly have that documented somewhere, and you can query that particular space to get much curated response, right? So in short, it is mostly like a subject matter expert in your team who can read, who can understand the entire code base, the documentation and everything, and he would guide you through the right path, right? So this is very similar to that. Let me show you quickly on how you can access the spaces, right? Yeah, the one that we did here done. So the same page, in the Copilot page, you can find the spaces. In the spaces, you could find something like this, where you can create a new space and add your docs. So for this session, I already created one just to ensure that we have something set. So here, I created something like AA agents. I have a repository created already, which had those code documentation for my own learning. So what I did was, I did add those files here, like an attachment from the repository itself, and it can help me to, query that, right? Say earlier I did ask it to generate a guideline for, running an agent in prod. So it did generate a response based on the code, based on the docs it had. So this is actually helpful for us to have a very confined documentation where you want to either brainstorm more or I have more ideas generated. So this is going to be really handy, where you can upload the actual files, that is the GitHub repo, and also code, and the spaces is going to be really helpful to even suggest you on based on the particular context. Yeah, this is it. And yeah, the other one, there's more on the general guidelines that we have, like finding the right tool. So as we discuss on all the 3 themes, right? So we pretty much have an idea of what to use for which one. Like, of course, the Copilot Chat is something comes very handy as when we develop. So for most of the things that we do, like for the code creation, testing, review, and the operations, we typically use the Copilot Chat. But for the end-to-end operations, where you want to completely run it in automated way, like we did right now for the SQLite database creation. So this is something that we can take a much better way. So we can run it on behalf. So now talking of that, I just want to reiterate the point, like even the coding agents are going to take your the instructions that we specified, right? So this is a new addition where it's gonna it's going to basically use the instructions that we have here, the corporate instructions and the instructions folder, and make use of it for the actual coding part. So this is actually a really good feature that we have, where not just on the Copilot chat but also on the coding agent, the instructions are being used. So that is one good aspect. And of course, we have the code review, which does a heavy lifting for us, where the code is actually reviewed upfront, and the trivial issues are already resolved. Okay, so just in the right AI model, yeah, of course, it depends on the usage pattern and what is exactly that we are trying to solve. So most probably we use for the 4.1, the GPT 4.1 for the usual coding type. That's what I actually used. So, but if you want to have more deeper reasoning, I think you can switch it for O3 to have more deep reasoning done. And if it's for the visuals, you can use like 4.0 to generate a screenshot and stuff. So just a high level glimpse. But at the end, we should also look at how do you write an effective prompt. It all boils down to the one thing, right? So now that the AI can do more things, but what is something that I can improve from a developer point of view is, what is the right kind of context question that I can ask to Copilot so that it gives me a proper response, right? Although we have a number of tools like custom instructions and things, but it should be very important for us to look at what is a good practice to follow. Of course, you should be specific and possibly provide some examples, and as possible, like break down the task, and adding the right context is going to be helpful, and iterating the prompt and writing the clean code to show this how it should be done. So that's something you can start doing with the prompt. So it's going to be helpful for you. So yeah, we're at the end of the session. Thanks for joining. There is one thing that I want to add. Like, there are very good changes that is happening with GitHub Copilot. You can always look at the change log here. That will give you a lot of idea on what is actually evolving every day. One thing that I want to call out today in the session is there is something called GitHub Spark. Sorry to switch. Yeah, there is something called GitHub Spark, very similar to even a completely automated coding, where you just specify what is required and right from the prototype to the complete full stack app development. So this is something it will create. Unfortunately, it is not available for the free users. It's only for the Pro Plus users. So yeah, this is something that you can look out for. With that note, I'm closing for today. Hope it was helpful.
Definitely, Dwarakanath. That was one full-packed, intense session on GitHub Copilot. So definitely, I got to know a clear prompt yields better completion, and also the repetitive or boilerplate or the extension that gave a very depth insight, and the audience also loved your session. And even though it took more than the stipulated time, we do have a
Sorry.
couple of questions which I will take. For Imran, yes, you have the recording. I think the team has already pinged the recording. You can watch it in case if you have missed it. And we have one question from Shahid asking, have you defined code generation instruction in the setting file?
Code generation instructions, I think, like, personally, I haven't done, since I've been using these instructions in the editor itself, but haven't used in the settings file. But I think that I saw in the VS Code documentation that can be done. I think it's a worth a try to see, if you want to really configure at the repo level, or if you want to configure at the user profile level. So that is something we can switch to. But yeah.
And on the same line, Shahid also kind of asks, can we define custom instructions for code review?
Custom instruction, yeah, of course, yes. This is something, the code, the Copilot instructions, right? So
yes,
the code review would also take the Copilot instructions. Now it's not just the coding alone. The code review is also going to do the same thing, right? So it's going to use your repo. It basically understands the instructions file that you mentioned there. So yes, the short answer is yes. The code review is also going to use your custom instruction.
Oh, okay. Well, as a developer, when I'm coding, I always have this assumption, or I have this question, like, Can Copilot learn or adapt to this project-specific architecture, like the coding conventions over time, or how can it effectively handle this large code bases? So I had always this question. So your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I understand. Like coming up with the enterprise point of view, right? The code base is huge. Probably it's a
Yeah.
monorepo where it is a larger things. So this is where I think like these tools would come handy, right? So now with the chat as well, you can typically use that to generate a documentation,
Mhm.
right, for each component alone. So now with the context being specified, it is easy for us to generate a respective component level documentation if needed, and from there you can generate an instructions file and then ask it to do certain things, right? So all I'm saying is it's not like you know just one place where you can go and find the answer, but if as a developer uh, you can take a step back and try to see how you approach natively, right? So now
Mhm.
that as a developer, I usually try to understand, go from the actual main file, try to identify what are the other route it goes to. Very similar to that, probably you can try from there, giving it a proper context, asking it to write some a complete sequence diagram as we did showed for one of the example. So
Mhm.
from there you can double tap on each component, go deeper, try to ask more questions on the operations of it, and ask it to explain. The ask mode is very handy there, but
Mhm.
also, yeah, this is where the agents are going to be quite handy for us to explore all of
Exactly.
these. Yeah, I think like as a developer, as we saw in the crafting prompts, right? So we should always make sure that we give it more sliced. We should know how to work through. So now that we are not just a developer, we're also an orchestrators, to make sure that the application is the right, uh, to understand the application, also to contribute it. So I think we can make use of these whole the AI tools available in the GitHub Copilot to make use of.
Definitely, Dwarakanath. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of more questions, but since we are running out of time, thank you so much, audience, for being on the show. We will leave the LinkedIn contact or the social connects of Dwarakanath in case if you have more questions or you want to connect with him personally and ask more questions. So they might flood with more questions, Dwarakanath, on your social media. So thank you so much again, Dwarakanath, for that insightful session on GitHub Copilot. And thank you, Larissa, for being a great host behind the screen. And thank you, everyone. See you again in another episode of Copilot Chronicles. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Thank you, Dorak, for your content sharing today. It was a great session. To wrap it up, I have to thank you all for your time here with us. And we are always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. So if you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear what you have to say. You can see in the chat, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.